Welcome. Lovely to see you.
Good to see you too. How are you?
I'm doing fine. We had this tradition on the first day where we lit the lighthouse so it's burning bright. And I'm so glad that you came to share your light with us. Thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure. Always my pleasure. I've forgotten what number time I'm doing this conference. Third, fourth, fifth. Okay, more than I thought. More than I
You
thought.
are you are one of the rarest people who I interviewed, and after this first interview, we did the first conference, and you were already there, even when this was in like 2020. So it's your fifth time, and thank you so much for that.
Thank you. It takes a lot more to run the conference the fifth time than to speak at the conference the fifth time. We all know who's doing more work.
We could do
Meanwhile,
this back and forth. Yes, I know that.
yes, we can. Yes, we can.
All right. I'll go into the shadow. Let me know when you need the videos. I am ready to be queued in. And thank you so much for coming. Guys, let's greet Anjali with the fires we have and enjoy.
Okay, well, thank you so much. Firstly, can I just get a little bit of a thumbs up? Can you see me well? Can you hear me well? Can you just give me a little bit of a thumbs up or a little reaction that you can hear me? I'm positioned properly for you. Okay, so Atom, of course you can. I can get some of you. Okay, perfect. I think if so many can, then most of you can. So up until the 1960s, in the streets of Singapore, which is where I live in Singapore, not on the streets, but in Singapore, maybe under a lighthouse, there was a tradition, a practice of storytelling or form of storytelling that existed, which was called Jianggu, which is a Mandarin word. Mandarin is the local language, the first language, not the first language is English, but Mandarin is a language widely spoken by people from China. And a lot of the people in Singapore are from China originally, and they speak Mandarin. So Jianggu is a Mandarin word, which means telling old stories. Now, in those days, there was no TV, of course, for entertainment. So people would gather in the streets of Singapore for listening to the storyteller. Now, the idea was that the storyteller would come, light a joystick, and tell the story. And when the joystick would be completely burned, it was time to wrap. So, in the spirit of stories, Singapore, and the signal tower or lighthouse, I am going to start my presentation today by lighting a joystick, keeping it aside or else it'll be distracting, and then hoping that I can wrap it up as it actually finishes. So from my story book today, I want to share 3 simple chapters with you. The chapter number 1 is called Me and the Lighthouse. Chapter number 2 is called Movies and the Lighthouse. Chapter number 3 is called Movements in the Corporations and the Lighthouse. So the next 30 minutes, everybody, is really about me, movies, and movements in the corporation, all 3 things, but only in service for our audience, which is you all, to entertain you, to educate you, more importantly. So I want to start off with the very first chapter, the very first one. The year was 2000, and this chapter is Me and the Lighthouse. So the year was 2000. I was only 19 years old. Wow, that was a long time ago. I had just landed in the world's best airport, Changi International Airport, in the world's best airline, to start my career for the very same airline that I had landed in, the Singapore Airlines. As you can see, at the tender age of 19, I am surrounded by too many bests. Best airport, best airline. And clearly, someone like me, coming from a developing country like India, which is where, although we all speak English, but English is not our first language, I am induced with a lot of self-doubt, if I'm really the right person for this wonderful opportunity that I have got at the age of 19 to be flying as a flight attendant for the world's best airline. Nevertheless, I move forward, and then I'm received by these people from Singapore Airlines and taken to what we call here the Singapore Airlines Training Center. The Singapore Airlines Training Center is where all our training takes place. I go there and I meet close to another 28 girls who, just like me, are also there to start their career with Singapore Airlines. Now, as I look around the room, the self-doubt becomes even stronger, because guess what? I am the shortest girl in the room, where their legs finished, my head finished. I'm all of 5 feet 2.5 inches. And now I'm really thinking, will I last in this role, or will I be sent back to my country because I'm somewhat not the right person for this role that I have been given? With all this self-doubt, I have traveled all the way from my home country to this country called Singapore, which is where I've continued living today. And we walk into this orientation auditorium. It's an auditorium, imagine with me, with this, theater-like seating for 200 people or so. It's dark, and 30 of us, this 30 girls make their way, and we take the first couple of rows and we sit down. All of us are seated and waiting for someone to come and start the orientation. And then a little light comes on the screen, and the screen starts to drop further and further down. We think maybe this is in preparation for someone coming up. Then the projector turns on and the light becomes even stronger. And then we see this story played on the screen. Now, we saw a 9-minute version of that story. I will show you a 1-minute version of that story today. That was my very first lighthouse identity story of my entire career. I want to show you that story. Atom, if you could just play that story for everybody. Even if you don't speak English, you'll be able to understand it. So let's have a look. My first identity lighthouse story. After I watched this story, I wasn't thinking if I'm tall enough, am I good enough, do I know English enough? The only thing I thought was that I was going to be the Singapore girl. And the only thing I really needed to be a Singapore girl was caring. In this moment, all the doubts vanished. And instead of the structure that we call lighthouse, what I was seeing in front of me was this mega image of me in my sarong kabaya, which is our uniform, thinking that is who I am, that is what I stand for. And from there on, every little difficulty that I faced as a foreigner living in a different country just at the age of 19, I would navigate that because I could clearly see what my nudge to the new identity was. For example, when we would do training, the trainer would take us on the plane on top of the choppy water and say, we are going to practice emergency landing today on the water. And we'll all be there on this plane and they'll have all this water gush, and they'll make these noises like the plane is crashing and wow, wow, wow. And the trainer would say to us, now you have to open the door and jump. And he'd look at us, and I'd be like, no, I can't jump. As I said, I'm brought up in India. Swimming pools are not everywhere for us to learn how to swim. We can swim to save our lives, but we are not great swimmers. And he would say, you jump. And we would say, no. The girls from India would say, no. And then he would say to us, you want to go back to your country, or you want to be a Singapore girl? And the moment he'll say, you want to be a Singapore girl, and we'll all jump. Because that identity, that lighthouse was so clear to us. Now, this was in the year 2000. 18 years later, in 2018, when James Clear wrote Atomic Habits, a book that did really well, I'm sure some of you have read it, he asserted, and in this book, he wrote that every action we take is a vote towards the identity that we want to form. And that day, my identity for myself was very, very clear for me. I even looked if I could find an old photo. That was me many kilos ago in the Singapore Airlines uniform. And this uniform was my identity. And the lighthouse was that I want to be the Singapore girl for the world's best airline ever. Now, this phenomenon of giving people an identity is not new. In the book Made to Stick, it is called Destination Postcard. When a first grade teacher, Crystal Jones, decides that she's going to make her first graders really, really advanced in all these subjects, she doesn't say to them that we are going to learn multiplication and addition and subtraction. What we are going to become by the end of the semester is third graders. We are going to be scholars. She then defines to these kids what a scholar actually means. She says scholar is someone who loves to learn and lives to learn. So the kids started calling each other scholars, and no doubt that by the end of the year, the kids could do third grade mathematics with ease. So the goal might have been to learn how to do mathematics for third grade, but the identity that drove those kids was that of a scholar. Lighthouse in front of them was that scholar that they wanted to become. Now, it is really important to understand and recognize that when we talk about building identities, they have to be shaped like a story. They have to be shaped in a fashion that people can see themselves, and that becomes the nudge to their new identity, just like the Singapore girl was my nudge to the new identity that I wanted. That brings me to the end of my first chapter, which was me and the lighthouse. I want to now move to the second chapter. The second chapter from my storybook for you today is called Movies and the Lighthouse. Now, I know some of us who work in corporations very quickly look at the movie idea and go, yeah, right. But you know what? In the last 10 years, I have learned, a lot doesn't work. It is happening on big screen. It's an entertainment is the purpose. But there are certain elements that you can learn from the big screen and apply to the corporation. In my third chapter, I will be taking you to the corporation and showing you how the same principles I have used in corporation and been able to drive the outcomes that the corporations were looking for. So back to the second chapter, Movies and the Lighthouse. On the 5th of April, 2024, this year, just about a month or so ago, a movie was released in Hollywood called The Monkey Man. It's done really well. It was launched in South by Southwest in America. The director, actor of the movie is Dev Patel. Now, it's a simple story, a very simple story of a young man who doesn't look physically strong at all, who wants to take revenge from this really strong people who are way stronger than him. And the revenge is because these people had killed his mother. Now, he makes many attempts, but he's not able to succeed. And then a turning point happens in this story, where he goes into this jungle where there is a village of these people who are very spiritually inclined. And in this one particular scene, he sits in this dark space, and there is this image, a statue of a Hindu god. And when he looks at that Hindu god, the note, the message that comes in front of him is, it is time to remember who you are. One more time, a nudge towards the identity, the lighthouse that stands in front of you, where you are not looking at yourself in the mirror, but you're looking at yourself tall and going, who exactly am I? And in that moment, he remembers that when he was little, his mother used to tell him a story of a god called Hanuman. Hanuman is a character from Hindu mythology and is a monkey man. He's half monkey, half man. And he doesn't physically look like really large or like a wrestler or something, but he is the epitome of strength. Every time in people who follow Hinduism feel fear, they actually start praying towards this god. Most Hindu homes will have Hanuman in their homes. I have one too, so I wanted to show it to you. This is the monkey man. So this boy feels that, you know what? I may not look physically strong, but my identity is that of Hanuman, who can kill the demon king and take over his army. And I can do that. And for that, I don't have to be physically transformed. It's my belief that matters more than anything else. And of course, with that belief, he goes back into the city, and it's a Hollywood film. He manages to beat those people who he wanted to take the revenge from. But more than the whole who beats whom part, what I'm really interested in is the self-belief that it actually builds. You know, the story that you are told as to who you are and what do you see yourself as can really, really change. Now, I have a huge love for running. And every time a friend of mine who is an excellent runner comes first and wins the trophy, I often ask them, so what goes through your mind? And my friends have always said the same thing. The only difference between you and the person who's come second or third is that you believed that you could come first. We are all great runners. So there is something to be, you know, something that we can leverage from building these identities that stand tall as these massive lighthouses in front of you and make you go, I feel like I'm in choppy water. I feel like I'm really not sure what's going on. I don't understand what the direction is, but that gives me the direction. That is what I'm going to chase. Now, I've spoken about me. I've spoken about the movies. But I think let's come down to the day-to-day world. When we get up in the morning and we go and work with corporations and try and see what we can do to help them navigate the difficulties that they are in. This brings me to the third chapter of my book, which is the movements in the corporation and the lighthouse. Now, this is perhaps the chapter that will interest you the most. Now, if you are somebody who likes to take notes and wants to learn practical things, then this is your time to do that. So please bring out your pens and papers if you want to, because this is where I would practically take you through some corporate experiences where I have been able to apply this learning of identity stories as the lighthouses for people to be able to navigate difficulties. Now, in December 2023, an international pharmaceutical company got in touch with me and said that they wanted to build their narrative for 2024. When I dug deeper, I realized that 2024 narrative development was far from an annual standard exercise. And there was a very specific reason as to why the company wanted to do that. If they did not have this reason, most likely they would have just done a business plan. But they were in some kind of a difficulty. There was the need to do a narrative because a business plan ain't going to work this time. So what was going on? Let's try and understand the context. Okay, so this pharmaceutical company had pinned their hopes on certain new products coming out in the market in the year 2024, which would form a large part of their product portfolio and drive a huge amount of profit for them or their business. Now, contrary to their expectations, all the clinical trials failed and they did not get these new products. So, to make it simple for you to understand, let's look at it this way. I am a pharmaceutical company. In my product portfolio, I have Decolgen as a medicine already. I have this, I sell this. I also have Panadol Active that I already sell. So I have two products that I already sell. Now, in the pharma world, every product sees somewhat of a decline in the product life cycle after a certain time. So what these two medicines would have given me 2 years ago is not what it will give me the third year. There are many reasons behind that, but we'll not go into it. But the product life cycles come to a certain sort of, they taper as time goes. Now, what they were hoping is that if I'm hoping that this would give me 20, this would give me 15%, this would give me 15%, I have 30% of my revenue, but I will also get these two new products, maybe Nurofen and maybe just a normal Panadol. Now, these two were under clinical trials. Now, both the trials failed, they are not coming. I'm left with my other two products, which are already in my product portfolio, and I'm meant to achieve 100% of the goal that is there for me for the revenue with the old products. What were they going to do? Now, I must tell you that this team is made up of very smart people. Their leader is specifically super, super smart. They're not going to sit around and not do anything. Very quickly, they put a plan together. And in their plan, the core idea is maximize the sale of our existing products. Take these two that we already have, maximize it. Now, logically, rationally, theoretically, this seems like the right approach. But what we often forget is that practically and emotionally, to maximize these two products would be so hard. It's almost like if I said to you, you want to be fit? What's the big deal? Eat healthy, go to the gym 5 times a day. And by the way, don't eat dessert, don't eat sugar. Here's the clear plan for you. Go to the gym and start eating healthy and you'll be fit. Yeah, sure, it is correct. However, the emotional energy required to do that is damn difficult. It is really, really hard. The leadership team needed to recognize that although their plan was correct, it was not going to connect, because where were the people going to find the energy to maximize the product that they already had been selling for a few number of years? Now, this is when the team started to feel like they were in the dark, feeling a little bit lost, not really sure. And to be very honest with you, even the leadership team started to feel a little bit like disheartened as to, what do we do here? And it's that point we started to search for our lighthouse. The very first thing we recognized was it was time for us to remind the team who they were. What was their identity? What was the lighthouse? They needed to build self-belief that they could overcome this difficulty. Now, I couldn't just sit there and come up with this fictional thing to say, you are the champions and you are the warriors. Personally, I hate that kind of stuff. What is the evidence? What is the fact that supports that you are someone like that? So what is the first thing we did was to go and look at this team's performance over the last 1 year. We looked at lots of different things that this team was doing. The stories we started to look at, okay, this story took place then, this story took place then. We started to collect these stories, and we came to a point where we saw a pattern emerge. Every time in the last 1 year, this team had been successful, either because they had planned something very well, or they had predicted something very well. And then naturally, because of good planning and predicting, they had performed really well. So when we looked at all the information, we said, this is great planning, this is great predicting, and therefore they are performing. So they are great planners, predictors, and performers. However, we were like, what is that one thing that encompasses everything because a lighthouse has to be one, it has to be that one thing. I am that. So when we dug deeper, we realized that all these three things could beautifully be encompassed into this identity that we called the linchpins. You are the linchpins of the organization. What is a linchpin? A linchpin is a person or a thing that is vital to an enterprise or an organization. For example, nurses are the linchpin of the healthcare system. A healthcare system cannot run without nurses. In these stories, we started to see how these people planned well, predicted well, therefore made the organization do very well and perform very well. There were so many stories that supported that. We were convinced that their identity, lighthouse identity, was that of linchpin. However, we needed to show that to them. Maybe they were that, but sometimes we need to get someone else to hold the identity in front of us and say, you are this because of this, this, and this. So what we did was we collected all these stories that led us to believe that they were the linchpins, and we started to socialize this identity. To give you an idea, for this conference, particularly, especially, I have curated a small video where I have taken different parts of the things that we had done for this program, and I'll show it to you in two parts. So the first part of the video will show you how we built the identity of you are a linchpin. Now, the total time would be about 58 seconds for the first part of the video, and we'll stop the video at 58 seconds. The first 12 seconds, the speed of the video has been increased on purpose, because that is where we talk about the success stories. And it's confidential information, therefore I can't show it to you. So I have just made sure that the speed is increased. So you'll watch it really fast. And at the end of showing them, you did this, you did this, you did this, therefore you are this. I'll bring you to that point. Okay. So Atom, if you could just help us show that first part of the video, that would be really good.
Anjali, I turned off your microphone during the video, so the sound was coming better. So please turn it back on.
Okay, it's on again. Thank you. So the first part was just to show them that they are the linchpins. They are the planners, predictors, and performers. Now, I want you to understand one thing. We can't come up with fictional identities. We have to really analyze people's work. Because if we come up with identities that have no evidence, that is not belief, that is delusion, which is belief built absolutely on no evidence. So these stories were really important to support the identity that we were trying to build, trying to get these people to actually go, yeah, that's who I am. I am a linchpin. So once that identity was built, then we had to socialize this identity, because I can say you're a linchpin because of this. But if your leadership team is not equipped to inspire you, to make you feel and believe through their storytelling abilities, then it is going to be very, very hard. So the second part of the program was where we actually equipped the leadership team to find individuals from their own teams and tell linchpin stories. So Matthew, what you did there is what a linchpin does. So Miriam, on that day when you did that, that is a very linchpin act. So we needed to define that linchpins are not these famous people. They are these day-to-day people who do things differently, who have decided that a different kind of work is important. This is where I will show you the second part of the video. By the way, this video in its entirety is never used in the organization. Just for this conference, I've plugged different things that we had used so that I can give you a better understanding of how we built identity to create a movement in an organization, which became the lighthouse for the people. So Atom, if you can actually just play the second part of the video for me, that would be helpful. Thank you so much.
It's easy to think of examples of linchpins. These are people with imagination, drive, and a capacity for hard work. But don't be misled by these examples. Linchpins aren't only those who head companies and organizations. Take the case of Johnny Ive, who was one of the designers at Apple before he was spotted by Steve Jobs and rose to head the industrial design team. Ive's unique vision is responsible for the iconic look of Apple's products. It is almost important to note that the linchpins among us are not born with a magical talent. They are people who have decided that a new kind of work is important and train themselves to do it. In the process, they become people who are so difficult to replace, so risky to lose, and so valuable that they might as well be irreplaceable.
So what does that make you? Are you a linchpin? Have you ever found a shortcut that others missed, seen a new way to resolve a conflict, made a connection with someone others couldn't reach? Even once, then you have what it takes to become indispensable by overcoming the resistance that holds people back. So I ask again, are you a linchpin? The short answer is yes, yes, you are a linchpin. So once we had built this identity, I clearly remember seeing the reaction of people and what they were thinking. At that point, they were really not thinking about not having these two products that they needed to have to manage the challenges ahead. What we saw was that the challenge was now an opportunity, and they felt like, of course, as a linchpin, if I don't have these challenges, then what am I doing? There is no opportunity for me to live my identity. So the whole mindset around the linchpin and around the challenges had actually really changed for people. This a new identity became the lighthouse, but the story around that was really, really important for people. You know, some think that this is some kind of a novel way to think, but truth be told, when I decided to do this with many organizations, it wasn't something that I had thought of on my own. I saw this in a movie. I saw this with myself when I first joined Singapore Airlines. I even remembered that the Apple's Think Different campaign was not very different. When of course it was different, but it was exactly on the same lines. Remember that campaign that said, here's to the crazy one, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs in the square holes, the one who sees things differently, they're not fond of rules, and they have no respect for status quo. You can quote them, disagree with them, glorify them, or vilify them. But the only thing you can't do is ignore them, because they change things. They push the human race forward. While some may see them as crazy ones, we see genius, because the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do. It is this desire to live the identity of people who think different and are the crazy ones that drives these people to really deal with these challenges that turn themselves into opportunities. So What is the point I'm making? The point I'm making is that whenever there is darkness, whenever there is difficulty, and there is always one, the only time people fear challenges is when they're unsure or if they can overcome those challenges. And people only feel unsure if they don't know who they are. Once they know who they are very, very capable of dealing with those challenges. So for me, when my clients say things to me like, I want to make my factory digitized, automated, smart, I turn around and say, oh, so you mean you want to make your employees supervisors of robots? And then when a client says to me, I want my researchers to use technology, I say, oh, you mean that you want augmented researchers? And then when my clients from the government say that we want to digitize the nation, I say, oh, you mean you want to make architects of Singapore's digital future. Every single time someone says that this is the goal, you have to think, what is the lighthouse identity for the people in that goal that can make them believe that they are truly capable of doing that? What does this mean for you? It very simply means if you're trying to inspire someone to take an action, and if they're feeling lost, an identity story as the lighthouse is the force that propels them to act in a direction and take an action that becomes the vote towards the identity they want to live. Just like when I went to work for Singapore Airlines, Singapore Girl was my identity. When in the movie, the protagonist was finding it really hard to take the revenge that he wanted to, Hanuman or the monkey man was his identity. In the corporation, when they felt like, good Lord, 70% of the projected revenue was going to come from the product that had failure of clinical trial, linchpins was their identity. When I run 42 kilometers as a marathon, running a marathon is a goal. Being a marathoner is an identity. And I run a marathon because I want to be a marathoner. Trust me, at 38 kilometers, I could kill anybody who comes in front of me, but I would run it because I want to be called a marathoner. When I pace many runs in Singapore, so pacers are people who promise a group of people in a proper organized run, I will get you to a finishing line in a certain time if you follow me. We have these balloons and we have these t-shirts on us, which is called pacer. I don't like doing that because that's a big responsibility for 21 or 42 kilometers. But why would I do that? Because I want to be a pacer. That is my pacer T. That is my identity. It defines your behavior. It defines as to how you show up in a certain time. And when I write a book, and writing a book for anybody who's written a book is not an easy task. If you've kind of done what I've done, you cry many times, but you write it not because writing the book is the goal. You write it because being called an internationally trade published author is the identity you want. If you want to make a change happen, tell identity stories, as they are the lighthouses that will help you navigate anything and everything. My joystick is almost to its end. And in the very Singapore street storytelling style, it's also time for me to wrap. Thank you for your attention and time.
You told me before the conference that as prepared as usual, but you totally rocked it. It was awesome. Thank you so much. So many stories, so many wisdom. Just incredible. Thank you.
Thank you. If you don't create platforms, I have no way to tell these. So thank you so much for creating these platforms, which help you dig deeper,
Yes. Oh, you are an amazing storyteller, as Yulia says. I'm totally seconding that. So, Anjali, we are a bit out of time, but I will ask you a traditional question. And if I may, can you stay and answer Yulia's personal question about a personal level in the chat?
You mentioned regular
just by text.
Oh, just by text. I will. By text, I'll do. No problem.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I will be asking you this traditional question I have.
Yeah.
You heard it before, but let me put it once again. So a story as a lighthouse can show us where the danger is, or lead to perspective, just like you're showing. And the chain of lighthouses is even better because it can guide us out of dangerous waters. So what story would you like more people to tell to create more lighthouses?
Okay. So, Atom, I thought, because you'd sent this question in advance, I thought a lot about this question. And I want to give the answer to this question in two ways. Okay. The very first way, it is a sin if I don't use a story to respond to this question. So, just a couple of weeks ago, I heard a conversation between one of my favorite storytellers, author journalist Malcolm Gladwell, and Adam Grant. They're having this conversation, and Adam Grant's new book, Hidden Potential, was released just last year. And the conversation is around hidden potential. And Malcolm Gladwell says to Adam Grant that, Adam, with every book of yours, you have become a little bit more comfortable telling your personal stories. And Adam Grant turns around and says that, yes, I hated that, because my natural way of being is that if you ask me a question, I would look at what is the recent study on this, what data is that proves this. But what I have come to realize is through the feedback is that not everyone thinks like me. People like personal stories. So I have come to a conclusion that I do have to tell personal stories. And the only rule I have, though, with my personal stories is that it always has to be in service of others. So if a chapter from my life can become a teaching for someone, I will tell that personal story. And I promise to you, up until 2 weeks ago, I hated personal stories. And that was one reason why I also today started with a personal story from Singapore Airlines, because I don't like getting into those spaces at all. So the one answer to your question really is, if personal story in service to others and can become a lesson for someone else for their life, please tell more personal stories. The second part to your answer is, I felt like we have too much telling and very little listening. So I think every time you tell with intention, because now we can tell at a lot of places. There are many ways we can tell our stories. So I think be super intentional and focused about why you're telling what you're telling. And otherwise, I think listen, and just keeping quiet is not listening. You have to listen with intent. So I think more than tell, I would say, I wish in this world we had more listeners. Because you can't really story tell until you're willing to story listen. That's it.
Oh, thank you so much. Love it.
My pleasure. Thank you all. I will respond to that question in the chat.
Thank you so much. You've lit our fires, as I can see on the platform, and lit our hearts with your light. So thank you for coming again this year. It's been such a pleasure.
Not at all. Pleasure is all mine. Good luck to all of you. Thank you. Stay storied, stay in touch. And Atom, you are an absolute gem for doing this year after year. I'm always in awe of and admiration of you. You are an inspiration.